Hello, welcome to Baltic World. My name is Crispin. 4 weeks into Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it's now reasonable to ask the question, has Russia lost this war? After all, despite weeks of intense combat, Putin has been unsuccessful in any of his preliminary war objectives. By now, he expected to have all of Ukraine under Russian control, a new government in Kiev, and termination of major hostilities with a favourable peace. Instead, the Russian army has failed to take any urban centre other than Kherson and has suffered as many casualties in 1 month in Ukraine as the Soviet Union did in 8 years in Afghanistan. Russia's military is experiencing serious problems. Troop morale is persistently sapped by poor logistics, lack of spare parts, fuel, water, food, ammunition, and other supplies. Erstwhile, everyone is becoming increasingly aware as to just how much Russian military hardware relies on foreign componentry, particularly high-end technologies which are subject to strict sanctions and cannot be easily replaced. Moreover, Moscow has altered its strategy radically in Ukraine yet again. The Russian military no longer feels confident that it has the strength to take Kiev, a fortified major city with determined defenders, particularly given the serious problems it's facing in every other urban centre with which Russia has significant on-paper advantages. Instead of seizing the capital by force, the strategy appears to be building defensive fortifications in a gradual encirclement, trying to force the Ukrainians to go on the offensive. In short, Russia's military is settling in for a long, bitter, grinding World War I style war of attrition, while its artillery deliberately shells all Ukrainian industrial centers, economic infrastructure, and urban areas in the hopes of bringing the Ukrainian people to heel and forcing its government to make terms. And we're witnessing the criminal human tragedy of this in Mariupol, a city of 500,000, which presently looks like Stalingrad of 1942 or Berlin of 1945. 24-hour bombardment, thousands of bodies in the streets, no one dares go outside to bury them. No water, no food, no supplies, no humanitarian corridor. This is a crime against humanity. And yet the skill and fierceness of Ukraine's continued resistance has surprised everybody, including the West. Washington simply wasn't ready for an intact, cohesive Ukrainian army able to go on offensive operations to retake territory seized and besieged by Russia. And yet the logistical mega project of the United States, Britain, and NATO is firmly underway. The Western allies are totally committed to making sure that the Ukraine can continue to fight for as long as they choose to hold out. And yet for all of that, will Russia's strategy of overt savagery be successful? After all, Mariupol is a city that is predominantly Russian-speaking, the very people that Putin claimed that he was protecting with his so-called special military operation. Russia's military is now destroying Ukraine overtly, and will this mean that Russia will be successful? Well, a grinding war of attrition may work for Russia on paper, except for one thing. Russia's economy is in free fall with no bottom in sight. In fact, the worst impacts are yet to be felt, and when they are, Russia is economically finished. What do I mean? Well, there are aspects of these sanctions that the Russian leadership could not have anticipated, much less compensated for. Not only has Russia been disconnected from SWIFT, Google Pay, Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal, the United States has managed to freeze the foreign currency reserves of the Russian central bank. Russia had $300 billion worth of foreign currency, which it would have sold off to buy up rubles to put a floor under the crashing exchange rates. However, Russia has been unable to access those funds with no means of stopping the fall of the ruble. Now, not only has the ruble fallen by 30 to 50% since the start of the war, people forget this is on top of the fact that the ruble had lost 80% of its value since 2008. In order to try and steady this collapse, the Russian government has instituted interest rates of some 21%, meaning the cost of borrowing for the Russian people is now totally prohibitive. Indeed, with these sanctions against the central bank, Russia's government is scrambling for foreign currency in order to service payments on overseas debts to avoid a default. This has resulted in Putin signing a decree saying that any Russian who gets paid in foreign currency, say YouTube creators, well, they have 3 days upon receiving their payment to transfer that money into rubles or face seizure. The consequence has been a mass flight from Russia. Thousands of people who get paid in foreign currency have already left the country. Thousands more are trying to escape. This means the only people left in Russia are those that won't be able to help Russia balance its accounts or stimulate the economy. And this papers over all the many economic problems that Russia was facing coming into this crisis, not least of which was the contagion likely to occur from China's Evergrande collapse. After all, China's housing collapse is being driven by construction companies with vastly too much debt. Chinese people often buy flats years ahead of time before their construction, hoping to buy it at a cheaper price than they otherwise would for a finished product and taking the keys with a new apartment. Well, this is the same scheme that happens in many parts of Russia as well, likely with the same degree of over-leveraging. And then, of course, is the sheer apocalyptic scale of the foreign companies that have left Russia. I mentioned in previous videos McDonald's, Adidas, Coca-Cola, and Pepsi. We'll add to that H&M, IKEA, many other industries, foodstuffs, freight, chemicals, white goods, all vanishing overnight. But most devastating of all is the flight of foreign tech companies, the components for which are an indispensable part of Russia's manufacturing base and cannot be readily substituted with domestic production. This means aerospace, road freight, trains, other technology, mining equipment, all of it is on a ticking time bomb, because as these things need replacing, repair, or new production, Russia will be unable to sustain them. To underscore the impact, here's an example. Russia's military would absolutely get top priority given the high-end operations in Ukraine, and yet its sole tank manufacturing plant has ceased production due to the lack of foreign components. Wash that across the commercial economy, and everything has come to a standstill. Okay, but does all this mean that Russia has lost the war? Well, tragically, military operations are going to continue for the foreseeable future. A country like Russia can maintain organized violence for a long period of time, and Putin is going to double down and triple down in the hopes of extracting something out of this conflict. However, strategically, it's beyond question. Vladimir Putin has driven Russia over a cliff. If we consider the arming of Eastern NATO, the realignment of Sweden and Finland, the massive upscaling of defense spending of Germany, and the abolition of Nord Stream 2, Russia has experienced pretty much all the things that it was seeking to avoid by invading Ukraine. Instead of having a strong pro-Russian buffer state on its western periphery, Ukraine is deeply embittered by this experience and will without question not only change its geostrategic alignment towards Europe, but its entire national identity, rethinking things like the former Polish-Lithuania Commonwealth, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, these countries that it now considers to be kin as well as friends. Militarily, the picture is more complex. Russia has adapted and is learning from its mistakes. We are not seeing the same mass ambushes of long convoys like we did in the first couple of weeks. Russian military is now doing proper reconnaissance, and they are relying on their strengths like their long-range artillery. That said, the support being provided by the Western allies is adapting as well. Instead of having a more defensive insurgency focused on purely urban fighting, America and the NATO allies will be providing Ukraine's army with the training and equipment necessary to go on the full offensive, perhaps even through military means driving Russia out of their homeland. That's all I have for today. Please leave your comments down below. Of course, I will keep you updated. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.